Welcome everyone, Christine here with the discussion about the price controversy for the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves for Total War Warhammer 3. You may not be aware of it if you only follow YouTube, but there is a huge controversy going on with regards to the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, and it's been going on ever since they announced the price of the DLC, and you can actually see it reflected in many reviews that this game does have on Steam. There's plenty of people unhappy with the price of the Chaos Dwarfs. Then there's people who don't care and people who defend CA. I admit, I understand not caring about it. If you have enough money to buy something, why would you care? But defending a price increase, which is only going to hurt consumers and hurt you as well, in an era where we've seen double-digit inflation, where we've seen the price of certain goods going up by double, and we now have more than a 25% increase in the price of a DLC for Creative Assembly, is not something that I think any reasonable person should defend, regardless of how good a piece of content is. And it's not like the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves is the most amazing piece of content that CA has ever released. Fall of the Samurai is very amazing, and Fall of the Samurai was relatively cheaper compared to this. Like, it was more expensive overall, but Fall of the Samurai added a lot more. Don't get me wrong, I love the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, and I don't think the price of it should undermine how good it is. But of course, a lot of people do hate the price increase for pretty obvious reasons. Now, the people hurt most by this aren't the people who have the money for it, and it's like, oh, you just have to pay more money for it, for a good piece of DLC. That's not really the case. It's the people who struggle day to day, and you can be certain that a lot of people do struggle on a daily basis. Like, I think there was a statistic before the pandemic, before inflation, before the war in Ukraine, showing that, like, 40-50% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who's living paycheck to paycheck. And I'm sure many of you are in one way or another, right? If you didn't get one paycheck for a month, you probably would be screwed. And there are people who do struggle to make ends meet. There are people who do struggle with the massive price increases. There are people who are paying substantially more just for basic necessities: bills, electricity, gas, internet, and of course food. For me, my food costs have increased substantially over the last 2 years, largely because of the war in Ukraine, the inflation situation. It has become a gigantic nightmare to deal with. And I can handle it. I'm sure many people can handle it, but it's certainly a significant price increase in my daily life. And it's also the fact that it's making people poor. So when prices increase for something that people want, people enjoy, a piece of entertainment, it is going to make a lot of people suffer. Simple as that. And there's also other aspects why you should care about this. One, the price of everything that Creative Assembly is going to release from now on, if this becomes the new accepted norm, is also going to increase. Because it's one thing for them to increase the price for a piece of content that's good, but they're also going to use that to increase the price of everything that they do. So the price of every single one of their games is going to increase. Don't be surprised when the next Total War game, the big next Total War game, whatever that ends up being, Medieval 3, a new Free Kingdoms game, whatever it ends up being, if that also increases. Don't be surprised if it's going to be $70 or maybe even more. Don't be surprised when games end up being $80, because if you accept that price increase, well, quite frankly, you are part of the problem in this particular situation. But what I want to talk about in this video is not to rehash the arguments as to why the price increase is bad. I've made a whole video on the subject. I made a video 1 month ago, but there was a particular comment that did catch my attention on that video from a person called Dead Like Me. Now, I'm not going to copy and paste the entire comment. It's a fairly long one, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that he's mentioning in that comment, but there is a final part that I do agree with completely. He says, "What saddens me the most is that the people who do have voice are often helping Creative Assembly instead of encouraging proper discussion like this video has done. New DLC and all I see is people using the CA trailer time for extra views while reading the exact PR marketing from CA." This is basically an accusation made that content creators don't care about the price increase. And certainly if you're looking at some of the biggest content creators for Total War, sure, some of it may mention it, some of it may care about it a great deal. But many of them also won't mention it at all, or if they'll mention it or even criticize it, it'll be a criticism in such a milquetoast and irrelevant way that it doesn't matter. Like, I love Mandalore Gaming, for instance, but when he just basically said that the blood pack for Warhammer 2 was just silly and left it at that, that was pretty disappointing, because it is more than just silly. It is price gouging of the worst possible kind. And that's, by the way, what a lot of reviewers, what a lot of journalists, and now what a lot of content creators do. All the things that people accuse reviewers, gaming reviewers, of doing years and years ago, are now things that content creators are doing as well. But why is that? Well, that's just how the game is played. There's many reasons behind this, but let's just go over those reasons. And I'm going to give you my perspective as a content creator. First off, we are not paid or rewarded, if you will, not paid directly, or not paid directly by these companies. That would create issues, right? Legal issues, if you will. YouTube might take a problem in that. And if there is a company in the whole world that might actually take an issue and have the power to do something about it, is YouTube. YouTube is fairly strict at times when it does matter. They allow a lot of things to fly, but one of the things they may not allow to fly, especially if there's like a paid review from a company and it gets found out that it's been paid, and especially if the reviewer doesn't mention that in the video, that would cause a lot of issues. They might shut down that channel completely, which would be a major problem for the person making that video. Now, the situation is far, far more insidious than that. Technically legal within the rules of YouTube, but still creating a lot of issues. So, first off, we don't get rewarded for being honest brokers. That's because we live in a society where people don't care about a lot of things, and if they don't care about something, they don't want to hear about it. If people don't care about the price increase, they don't want to hear about it. There's plenty of people who only want to hear what they want to hear and will ignore any kind of criticism for their precious game. And this is a far bigger issue than just gaming. It affects all aspects of our lives, going all the way to politics, where you have the insulated communities or the echo chambers that have been created, especially in the social media sphere, where people will only listen to those that are telling them what they want to hear, not the truth. The truth is irrelevant. Now, I try and keep it as straight and honest with you guys when it comes to it, but, sometimes as a content creator, you ask yourself, what's the point in covering a particular topic if all you're going to get for it is squat? The reason this matters is because how YouTube works and how social media works in general. It's not a YouTube issue. It's not a CA issue. I'm just using this as an example. It's how YouTube works, how social media works, in that you get views based on retention. You get views and you get clicks and views based on retention by how much people like a video, how much people watch a particular portion of the video, and how many people come back to you. If you're saying things that a lot of people may not want to hear, regardless of whether or not you're true on the subject or not, regardless of whether or not you're honest on a subject, then just from a natural perspective, you're going to get less views for that video, which means less money, which hurt, and ultimately you're going to suffer. You're not going to gain the same subscribers, you're not going to gain the same number of views, you're not going to gain the retention you want. And as a result of that, just that simple fact, what YouTube has turned into is from this public discussion sphere where people could talk about a whole variety of subjects and have completely different opinions. It has turned into this echo chamber of certain viewpoints, are acceptable if you're appealing to the audience that you're making the video for. You can still make very critical stuff, but more and more and more, I think a lot of us are seeing, like, when we see videos of a particular game come up or of a particular subject come up, it's generally the kind of video that appeals to the broadest possible audience and doesn't necessarily talk about issues on a subject or game or anything like that. And it also has this particular aspect affects all media, not just social media, all media. And it also goes all the way to the wiki itself. Because why does the wiki page for gaming products read like propaganda pages for every single one of those gaming products? Oh, this game came out and it had positive reviews while ignoring all the huge amount of criticism that game had. Oh, this game did well, or this game had decent reviews, and then it sold like crap and didn't make any money, and the company cut down support. There's a lot of games like that. Now, I think part of it is because developers and publishers do look and edit those pages, and also partly because of the way Wiki works. The way the Wikipedia works is fine. It's just that all the incentive is for journalists, for gaming websites, for content creator. All the incentive is for them to be positive and not go into the roots of anything negative, because that's how they'll gain more money. That's how they'll gain more views. The more views they have, the more legitimacy they have. You get the idea. And also because the wiki only accepts major sources of information. So a lot of people screaming on Reddit about something is not necessarily going to be mentioned on the wiki unless a publication talks about it, and it's a respected one. Therein lies the root of the issue, isn't it? It just feeds into the system, this echo chamber that has been created online. That's one of the big issues when it comes to this, and why you don't necessarily see a lot of the problems video games have. Plenty of them have. Not talking about CE or Total War here. Vast array of games have a lot of issues. Oh, this game came out like, Active Aggression. Let's talk about the strategy game many of you may not have heard of. It's like, it got these decent scores on Metacritic, and then the player base slammed it. Would you get that information online on the Wikipedia? Probably not. Or if you do, for a game like that, I'm not sure if Active Aggression has that on its page, but if you do get that kind of information, it's so toned down that it might as well be irrelevant, and it certainly doesn't capture the full picture of a particular title. And this affects every subject imaginable under the sun, that affects people's daily lives in every way, shape, or form. Granted, the wiki is a lot better in certain serious subjects, but you get the idea. So that's one of the issues, these echo chambers that have been created online, that people only want to hear what they want to hear, and they don't care about the truth. And I'll give you an example that I went through, and it took me a while to realize what the issue was based on what I was doing, because this was the first time I was really confronted with this. For many years, I made videos on every subject, and I gave my frank and honest opinion, but then I started talking about Burning Crusade Classic for World of Warcraft, and the issue there is, I looked at what Blizzard was doing with Burning Crusade Classic, and I said, okay, dividing the content of the game like they were going to do, because the way World of Warcraft is, for people that don't know, is that it has different tiers. Tiers of raiding. This also affects arena, PvP. The way Blizzard decided to do this remake or remastered version of an old game was they took two pieces of content, Tier 4 and Tier 5, that originally came together when the game was launched. That's how the game was designed. That's how the game was meant to be played. It came out to 2 raiding tiers at launch, and they took an entire raiding tier, Tier 5, and split it off for months. Why did Blizzard do it? They wanted to pad out the length so that Burning Crusade Classic would last longer, because that's how World of Warcraft works. You have a raiding tier that lasts a certain number of months, then you have to release a new one because people get bored. Now, I was very vocal in my opposition to this move, in that I knew, as someone who had played Burning Crusade a lot and knew quite a bit about how that game was going to end up being, I was very vocal against this change. What happened to me? Well, before that point, I had been inviting to podcasts and content creator communities. After that, I started getting blackballed. Because 1, the vast majority of people did not agree with me. 2, the vast majority of content creators didn't agree with me. 3, I was saying things contrary to what Blizzard was doing. And 4, people don't want to hear negative shit. Doesn't matter if you're true or not. And so I get blackballed. I didn't get banned from YouTube or anything like that, but I just got removed from a lot of those content creators communities, because as someone said it to me, it's like, you're saying things that are negative, but the people who are playing the game, the people who care about that negative sentiment aren't people who are playing the game. The people who are playing the game don't want to hear it, basically. That's the issue. The second issue is that viewers complained to the people I was doing podcasts with or doing collaborations with about my comments. What happened, by the way? Just for those that are curious, Burning Crusade came out, display content was boring as dirt. Playing people hated it. The player base plunged. Being right, however, doesn't mean that you're going to be well off for it. So if saying the truth and being critical and being an honest broker and reviewing things based on their merits and how things are going to play out doesn't really work in this day and age. That's a problem. That's a major issue, because if journalists, I don't consider myself a journalist to be very clear on this, but if people who are in the know on a particular subject, and I know Burning Crusade, I led the guild in Burning Crusade, I dealt with a lot of it, I know how content in World of Warcraft works, I know how people play the content. Like, if you want to know how I'm doing a lot of these guides, the greatest experience was leading a guild on a TBC fun server, if you will. for about 7 months for all of the content of that particular expansion. And we went from tier 4, tier 5, tier 6. So I know how people consume that content, because that was one of the issues that I had to confront myself. It's like, okay, I may play a lot of hours, but the people I'm playing with, they come home from work. They only have a limited number of hours. They may only play 2-3 days a week. How do we get through this content as quickly as possible? And I knew that splitting the content like this, when it was designed, when Blizzard themselves designed it initially to be put together, I knew it was going to be a disaster. It ended up being a disaster. I'm sure some people will come out, I like Burning Crusade Classic. That's another thing I'm going to mention. What's the point in being right on a particular subject if, regardless of what you say, regardless of what you're correct or not on a subject, doesn't matter if you're right, if you're wrong, if you're a complete whack job who's just spouting shit that he believes in, what does it matter what your opinion is if, regardless of whether you're correct or not on a subject, you're just going to get flamed and trolled and get tons of toxic comments? Now, I've always been of the opinion for people that have social media accounts and have a lot of influence, that it's part of, the job description, if you will. That a couple of online comments are not going to kill you. The problem is, when you get online comments like that every single day for your videos, if you say they don't affect you, that's a flat out lie. They do affect you. And maybe you don't want to get 100 flaming comments for a video you're doing. Maybe you don't want to have that in your life constantly. Maybe you don't want to deal with that constant stream of negativity in your daily life on every single day. Because when people saying something that you dislike, well, let me just say this. Imagine you're watching this video and fundamentally disagree with everything that I'm saying. Fair enough, right? Maybe it pisses you off, maybe it gets you angry, etc. Well, take that, multiply it by 1,000. And that's how a content creator might feel on any given day. Doesn't matter how much effort you put in, doesn't matter if you're correct or not, doesn't matter if you're honest and truthful, doesn't matter if you're a lying scum. You will always get those kind of views. Now, I've gotten pretty good at filtering people out, and so has YouTube, by the way. They won't allow insults to be just posted on you. I do occasionally remove things from my spam folder, or the spam comments, the things that get marked as spam from YouTube. And YouTube tells me, do you really want to read these? Yeah, I do read them. I read every comment that people make, by the way. Sometimes I approve things that YouTube has marked as inappropriate, but I do read every comment. Now, you could just say, don't read them. I think you're doing a disservice to yourself as a content creator in the first place if you don't read the feedback that people are giving you, even if it's extremely negative. But yeah, imagine the rage you're feeling if you see a video that you utterly dislike from someone you utterly despise. Multiply that by 1,000 and you might understand what a content creator might have to deal with, especially the big ones. So if you're in the shoes of a content creator like that, and I wouldn't consider myself a huge content creator, but those that are, imagine the level of negativity they have to deal with every day. There are multiple ways of dealing with it. You can filter your audience. You can remove the ability of people who constantly post flames like that to post on your channel. And eventually things will get better if you constantly filter out those comments. Yeah, surprisingly, I've done that. I'm not ashamed to admit it. People who throw toxic comments in my comment section, you're not going to last very long in there. I'm not going to tolerate that. And surprisingly, it leads to a better comment section. I disagree with the principle, but in practice, it works. In practice, it does actually work. But that's another reason why you might not see controversial opinions, quote unquote, or critical views of a particular product. Because it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, you're going to get criticized for it. And you're going to get criticized in a way that isn't nice. And it's going to ruin your day. Some comments genuinely do ruin your day. It can only take one particular comment to ruin your day on a particular subject. Because I could put 20 hours in a particular video, and it's not necessarily like, oh, you recorded the footage. No, it's not about the footage. It's what I'm saying. For this particular video, as an example, I spent days and days, weeks even, thinking about how I was going to make a video based in response to a comment I got on my first one. Consider that for a moment. And I went through the various nuances of that particular subject. And that's just, everything I've said is just part of the problem. Then there's creator access. And here I want to be very clear. Creative Assembly is certainly a lot better in this industry than a lot of companies are. Whatever criticism I might throw against Creative Assembly, when it comes to their handling of content creators, they are vastly better than a lot of companies out there. The reason I say that is anyone can sign up for their content creation program. I've seen very small channels get pretty good access to their content creator program. So they're not discriminating. They're not just giving codes to the very big channel channels that attract hundreds of thousands of views. So that's fair, and they don't restrict you from saying anything on a particular subject. There are companies that will do that, like I think Zero Punctuation alluded to the fact that Sony didn't give them a free review copy of God of War Ragnarok for some of the things they had said, or because they weren't willing to toe the line, so to speak. There have been cases in the past where companies cut off access to review copies for a game. Now, let me talk about why this matters. It's not because we're getting a free game. The free aspect is irrelevant. Like $100 game, $200 game, $1,000 game, I'll pay for that, genuinely. Like if the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves right now was $300, easily paid for that. And I'm not the biggest channel. If you look at some of the biggest channels, those that rake in millions of views for a particular DLC they cover, a particular game they're covering, they would pay thousands to get it, let alone getting it early. That might be worth far more. Now, companies will not pay you money, but they will give you early access. So they'll give you the game for free or the product for free. And two, on top of that, they'll give it to you early. Now, why is this important? It's not just the ability of posting footage early. That's not only the most important thing. And there is a certain criticism to be had because there's a tiered approach to this. Like every company gives different content creators the content differently. Some content creators might get content very, very early and post it the earliest. Well, guess what? Those people are going to make the most money. Doesn't matter how good their content is, just because they're getting the footage out there early, they're going to make more money because they're going to get the views the earliest. So getting the content the earliest does matter. This is something Creative Assembly does, though, to be fair to them. The people they give the earliest access to seem to be the people that need to earn their trust, basically. And trust in the sense not that you're not going to criticize them, more so trust in the sense that they don't want you posting footage past a certain metric. I think for Total War games in general, even with the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, based on like a video the Great Book of Grudges did, they weren't allowed to post past turn 30 of their campaign, and basically CA needs to trust you that you'll respect their conditions. So you need to earn that trust by being part of their creator program. Everything I'm mentioning here, by the way, is publicly available. I'm not giving you any secrets. Not there's any secrets to give, to be quite honest on this subject about how it operates. It's fairly open and transparent, which I absolutely like about how they do it. And I do have a lot of bad things to say about the Creative Assembly's business practices over the years, and even the way they handle content creators for a great deal of years, but hey, they've gotten their stuff together, and I wish more companies did it as well. Because I've gotten review codes, I've gotten beta access from Blizzard themselves for the Wrath beta, for instance, and I gotta tell you, the way that was handled, completely different experience, and, well, even Blizzard is better than what some other companies are doing, like Sony, as an example. So it differs dependent on the company, but you get the idea. It's important for a content creator, for a journalist, for a reviewer, for gaming websites to get access early. Not necessarily about paying the money, but about getting it early. Not just because you're posting videos early, but because being able to play something early and record footage, even if you're only allowed to share that footage on the day of review, that's great. You can make 10 videos before something goes out. And you can have those videos lined up, like with the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, when I could post campaign footage or do a review, I had a lot of that recorded. The review itself kind of was a last-minute recording, but a lot of the videos that I did for the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, I was able to do when the embargo expired. And I already had them recorded and lined up, ready to go. And that is a major advantage. But the vast majority of companies that exist out there are not going to give this for free. The way companies view content creators is an extension of their marketing team, basically. That's where the term influencer comes from. And I personally really dislike that term because I'm not here to manipulate people. I'm not here to bullshit people. I'm not here to control people or manipulate them into buying a product. I'm not really interested necessarily in that subject. I'm here to play games, post videos on those games. It's not my interest in selling copies of a game for a company. But other people, they do embrace that particular role of being a sellout, if you will. Bit nasty, sure, but effectively being sellouts for certain companies, for whatever product they're promoting. And they're not breaking the rules, they're not doing anything illegal. Hell, you can even argue the morality of it, if you will. But there is a major problem when all of the when the entire incentive structure for a content creator, for a reviewer, for a journalist, and every content they make, regardless of how serious or not serious the subject is, every incentive they have is to not tell the truth and tell people what they want to hear, and also try and make the companies happy one way or another. The company is not going to give you early access unless they consider that they're getting value from your coverage. That's why IGN, for instance, gives certain companies certain scores that they pull out of their ass, for instance. Because guess what? IGN has an amazing working relationship with a lot of big publishers. And guess what? They get some of the earliest access in the entire industry for gaming products. And as a result of that, they make a ton of money. And this extends way beyond gaming. Now, I don't hate IGN as many other people do, but that's one of the things they do. And that's just how the game is played. It's also how the game is played for political journalists. Yeah, wonder why media is so biased when it comes to covering politics? This is the reason why. Partly people hear only what they want to hear. They don't care about the truth. The truth is irrelevant. They also want to focus on certain stories versus others. As an example, like, I'm going to mention it, right? Sue me. Like Trump's current lawsuit. There's so many things going on around the world. I get it's important, but think on the fact that that's the most spoken about story in so many media outlets. And yet there are so many other stories of human pain and suffering that get barely any attention, if any attention, in the mainstream press. But that's just how the incentive structure works. I know a friend who worked for one of the big media companies in the US years ago. And he told me, like, focus on Trump, as an example. Like, that's what their bosses were telling them, because that's what made them money. And we're not charities here. We have to earn a living. Like, content creators are not big media conglomerates, people. We're people that, just as you, many of us, we live paycheck to paycheck. We struggle with our bills. We have expensive costs in computer parts and games, buying all these games and playing them. And not all of them pay for themselves, to be clear. Like, just over the last 2 months, I've bought a couple of games that barely made me any views. For instance, Hogwarts Legacy, The Great War, as just two big examples over there. So it's not like sunshine for any of us either. And being poor and correct is not exactly as exciting as it might seem. Just going to mention that. So that's where you get these kind of issues, where major issues for everything really that goes on in life gets ignored by the media powers, because there's no incentive for them to speak about the truth. And there's no incentive for them to speak about certain stories that people don't care about, or to cast certain companies in a negative light when those companies are bankrolling them. Not necessarily directly in a lot of cases. They're more clever than that, but access is vital. Early access is so crucial and makes such a huge difference for a content creator. I hope Creative Assembly doesn't mind the political mention in this video. Not taking an opinion on the case, not mentioning a particular opinion, but just going to mention there's a lot of important things that go on around the world that get ignored. There's important things that happen in video games. There's particular important stories. There's so many issues in Total War that never get mentioned, or games in general that never get mentioned, because there's no incentive for a creator or a gaming media outlet to ever talk about them. And also because, well, if you're not paying for the price of a game, what do you care about the price? Obviously, you care about it doing well and selling a lot of copies because that creates interest. Yeah, you do care about that, but do you care about the price of a game yourself if you're getting it for free? And even if you have to pay for it, what do you care about paying for it when you're going to make money as a result of that? Sure, it might be a loss, but you're obviously never going to have the same perspective as a content creator as someone who's just playing a game in their free time. Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.